It's not because Christianity recommends, X, Y, and Z, but it's through Christianity that we become great.
They condemn racism, but they only condemn whites who happen to be racist.
And in a way, God is just whatever it is that keeps our civilization going.
White people are constantly being told that race is a social construct. It's not even biological.
And you think, where do you belong? Yeah, you belong in a shopping mall. There's nothing to you other than that.
Hello, everybody. I am Matthew Drake. Back finally. This is my first stream of 2019. So thanks for tuning in. And the reason, as some of you may know, that I've been a little absent is that I just had a baby daughter and couldn't be happier about that. Of course, everyone's healthy and doing well, but yeah, a little little short on sleep these days, but happy to be back here. And our first a very appropriate guest to have on is Steven Franssen. We are going to talk about parenting. Steven is a father himself, a husband, an author, a musician, as well as a life coach. And his website's in the description below. So we're happy to welcome him back to the show. So how are you doing tonight, Steven?
Yeah, doing pretty good. It's a pleasure to be here, Matt.
Excellent, excellent. Well, to get things started off, a lot of people kind of talk to death about the birth rate crisis and how, white birth rate, especially in the West, is pretty low. And so I don't think we really need to focus on that so much. But one of the things that I particularly want to get your jump into is antinatalism, because my wife actually listened to some of your work before we got together, before we found each other, and she that you were instrumental, I would say, in bringing her around from the antinatalist position. So I guess to get things started off, can you tell people why they should have kids?
Well, I think the most basic reason why you should have kids is because they're wonderful and you're just signing yourself up for a life of joy. I mean, that's if you've done your homework. That's if you've prepared to be a parent. And if you have, it's pretty smooth sailing. It's like, maybe 12 weeks of parenting classes, and maybe you do some self-knowledge and some therapy, and then you're basically ready to go as long as you have the finances. And kids are just a lot of fun. So I think that that's really the first thing. They especially become fun about 3 months. And then the second reason, just off the top of my head, why it is so important that people have children and why it's just such a pleasure to have children is that you basically assure that you have people around in old age to take care of you. Or, if you do a bang up job, that is, if you're a failure as a parent, then, what can you expect? But we have a situation in the West where entitlements are promised to the boomers. The boomers have this situation where they think they're going to get dental until 2040, 2050. And the entitlements are going to run out. Social Security is going to dry up in about 2033 or something like this. And so millennials and even some young Gen Xers and Zoomers who are considering becoming parents really have to think long and hard about society structure when their children come of age and when they start to enter old age themselves. So that was a rational calculation that I made. I looked at my life and I thought, well, I could amass money, but then who's going to take care of me? And we've all seen these horror videos of like World War II vets being taken care of by people who, aren't their family members and often aren't the same race as them. And these old fellows are just abused brutally. And people just have no skin in the game. They have no reason to care about these old white people. And, living in Salt Lake City, I got to see a lot of Mormons there and a lot of how there would be like 4 generations of family just at a family reunion that you'd see like a barbecue, or you'd go to someone's place, and there would be all these generations of the families, and everyone took care of each other and everyone was helping each other. And I think that that's so important in the West. It's so important that we bring back families, and it's so important that we transmit our values and our finances fundamentally to our own biological children, rather than having the third world come in. And, you know, the funny thing is these third worlders are coming in. We think that they're propping up the retirements of the boomers. But what's really going to happen is that those of us who have been pushed out of society are going to end up having to pay for the migrants' retirements. So we're not importing a serf class like we think we are. They're actually going to be more aggressive politically, and they're going to take over, and they're going to have entitlements that they're going to expect from who else but us, the value producers, the straight white males, the main taxpayers in society, and the only people that really vote to the right. So those are just a couple reasons: the absolute joy of having kids, and then a longer-term calculation about personal security and familial strength down the line.
Yeah, someone says in the chat, if 80 IQ people can have kids, then so can you. That's true. It's not really that hard. We all know how to do it. Now, the hard part, which we will get into, is, of course, raising your kids in a healthy manner. And, well, yeah, let's talk about that. Some of the stories that have been in the news, you know, we've all heard probably about Desmond is Amazing, this cross-dressing child, and their parents are putting them, letting this child cross-dress and get money thrown at him on stage. It's a horrible, abusive situation. And then another story that I came across recently, what is the girl's name? I think it's Luella. She's the daughter of some actor, and a white girl, very pretty, blonde, and of course she's dating this African guy, and they go to this festival. She overdoses, and because this guy had a criminal record, instead of calling the cops, which is the normal thing to do, or call 911, he films her as she's dying and laughs at her, makes fun of her, saying, "You're such a drama queen." Meanwhile, you can find pictures of this family, and so the guy was invited to dinner, so they had full knowledge of this guy, and I mean, dereliction of duty, irresponsible, that doesn't even begin to cover it. These stories seem to be everywhere, and sure, maybe there's some, you know, African Americans out there, or African British people who will, you know, be able to fit that mold, and they're not going to be as stereotypical hoodlum like this person was. But it's just a tragedy what is happening, and the complete hands-off nature. So, I mean, of course, we all want our children to be free to choose things, but people have taken this freedom to an extreme level, and they just don't understand that they are not fulfilling their duties as parents. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think as a parent, you have to, when your children are of age, when they are in the age of reason, you know, that starts around age 8 or so, where children really start to be able to grasp abstract reasoning, is you have to slowly introduce the principles and ideas that make civilization work. And what does not make civilization work is miscegenation. And, you know, I hate to be so blunt about it, but a lot of these societies, a lot of these older societies that were very successful and were very renowned, were of a very different racial component and makeup than what they eventually came to be when they had their decline. A huge part of Rome's decline was genetic, and it had everything to do with lower IQ populations sweeping in and intermixing with the Romans, the patricians, the sort of like upper class, the elites, the ones that were the senators, mixing in with them. They were all too happy to mix with these people. The IQs dropped, and then bada bing, bada boom, you have the end of an empire. The same happened with the Greeks. The same happened with the Egyptians. There are statues unearthed all the time in Greece with blonde people, and we very clearly see that after a lot of pressure from Turks and Middle Easterners, the Greek genetic pool has changed dramatically. And so we have a similar situation in the United States, where the third world has been basically invited in by the liberal political elite. And we're seeing a lot of mixed race couples being pushed in the media. This is a huge problem because not only are the crime rates much higher, I mean, the divorce rate between black men and white women is astronomical. And we really don't even need to jump into the black on white crime statistics to just have a very calm and measured look at what the outcomes are for these couples. It is so often fatherlessness. It is so often, assaults in the home. It is so often problems that mixed race children have, including, difficulty finding transplants. Their bodies really attack a lot of the organs that are available to them from donor lists. Mixed race children also have issues psychologically. They are just experiencing a whole host of issues psychologically that, children of a singular race don't have. And also there are just behavioral problems that come with that. So we really need to be careful what we're promoting in our media, what we're promoting in our messages, and to have a really sober outcome, or sort of like a view of the outcomes and understanding of what all that means. And so to explain that to a child takes a long time. It takes a while. And you have to start sort of from the ground up, and you have to talk about, different subspecies. You look at bears, and there are different subspecies of bears. And it's an interesting thing that while some of them can mix, it's generally not to their genetic favor, because they were raised in different environments. They came up in different environments. They have different competencies. And that is the same for the human races. And so if we really want to celebrate diversity, we need to stop pushing the mixing of the races. And, it's like there's a huge push also from black men who are really unhappy that white men are taking all their women. So this runs both ways. This isn't like a, whites got to hold on to being white sort of thing. It's like there are a lot of black people that want to hold on to being black, and they're proud of their heritage, and they want to keep it that way. And when the media is pushing all these white male, black female couples, and, Serena Williams, I believe it's Venus. I think Venus is the larger one. Whoever's the big one, Serena, the big bulky one, she got with a Jewish guy. And I'm not so sure that the Jewish community is all that happy about it. The Jewish community is seeing something like 50+% out marriages with people who are not Jewish, as a huge crisis, especially amongst the Orthodox community. The Orthodox community is their most conservative, so to speak, sort of branch of Judaism. And they're not happy with this. Their congregation rolls are going way down. So this is a problem for many different peoples. And it's important to sort of touch upon that universal principle when you're talking to your kids about their dating prospects and the pressures that they're going to be facing through the media to date outside of their race, why there are risks associated with this. And, even you can just talk about basic empathy, like birds of a feather flock together. If you try to get with someone who comes from a pre-Enlightenment culture, you're going to be treated in ways that you are not used to in the home, and you're not going to have a good time of it. So you can keep it as basic as that, but there's a whole host of issues that we can attribute to this situation that this girl found herself in. Overdosing at a musical festival is just so terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on the miscegenation thing, this Twitter guy I was getting into an argument with, which I don't even need to make this just about my Twitter feed, but he probably an ANCAP guy. He's got a black and yellow frog, and he says, "Do you have any good arguments against miscegenation?" And then I responded, "It's the same as diversity. If everyone was doing it, maybe it would be okay, But if you have even one group who refuses to race mix, they gain a significant advantage because they have natural in-group solidarity with their own kind, which, as you mentioned, the Jewish group has had that for a long time. And it seems like they have sort of offshoots out there that go and mix, and then they try to keep their conservative core. And man, I wish we could do that. If we could just if all of our liberals just wanted to go and be cosmopolitans of the world and go to Asia and all that stuff and take their liberal policies there, how much more cohesion we would have here. But no, we're stuck with our liberals, it seems. But yeah, I think there is a certain segment of people who really do have hatred in their hearts, and so that's why I say, you know, this guy, he was saying that it's better to oppose it on a level that's not moral, and I would disagree with that. I think it is a moral issue, because a lot of people the anti-whites and so on, the people wanting to destroy the West, they see this as a moral battle, and they, for whatever reason, they just want to destroy, and they have hatred in their hearts. And so when they see a wholesome white couple with lots of kids, you know, there's just something in them which is this venomous nature comes out, it seems like. And it's sometimes hard for us to understand that. Like, I see a black family or whatever that's wholesome, and I don't think, oh man, we need to get on this abortion thing, even though you could make the argument, like, the population is booming in Africa. Like, not that I'm for the sterilization or anything, but this is just a reality that these third world populations, which are low IQ populations, are multiplying due to the foreign aid and everything, and it's setting us up for disaster in the future. And I just, you know, the people who can't see that, they're either willfully not seeing it, or they're just so blinded by their ideology. Right.
That's absolutely right. I mean, people are just so afraid to differentiate, to classify, to it's just such an anti-scientific attitude that people have really been inculcated with through the education system in the last 60, 70 years. A lot of this stuff just occurred to people naturally. And there's some very interesting books written, you know, 70, 100, 120 years ago about the different peoples of the world. But now we just have such an anti-science culture that you can't state these things plainly and try to classify and categorize and work from there.
Right. So I guess we can now move on sort of to the maybe more practical stuff. Is what is your philosophy on parenting in some people call it clown world, or the current year, where you do have all these insane social justice campaigns, and it's only building up. I mean, you have to be super naive to think that, oh, this is as far as it's going to advance. They're not going to take it any farther, you know. But so by the time you know, you and I have kids who are young, probably. So by the time they reach, well, just even going into kindergarten, what is it going to be like then? And going into high school and so on. So you know, a lot of people in our circles do take the sort of libertarian position of opting out or homeschooling. So there's that kind of stuff. But are you an opt-out kind of guy and go live in the mountain, or do you try to make the best of what you have? What do you think about that?
Well, opt-out becomes a necessity when whites who founded America, let's be very clear, whites founded America, they built America, they created a Western civilization. When whites no longer have the political will or the political path to holding on to the United States in particular, then it's diaspora time. And then, yes, it's head to the mountains. I don't think we're at that point. The Donald Trump administration could yield a wall, or he could get primaried by someone who will actually deliver on immigration promises. So I'm really not like it's a lot of people want to do this run to the mountains thing or opt out sort of thing on principle. And I would rather do it empirically. I would rather just wait and see and make a value judgment at some other point in time. And obviously consulting with the most intelligent people I can. So that would be, you know, the opt-out strategy. That would be the opt-out option. But I'm really of the mind that you want to homeschool your kids. You don't want to send them to public school. That doesn't mean you have to live in the hills and be like a strange homeschool family. There are homeschool organizations, and you can also get the kids in, depending on what vaccinations you want to do, on Parks and Rec and different sort of like sporting and club events. So you can sort of be in orbit a little bit of the public school system without actually having to put your kids in the public school system. That's how I plan on doing it. It's important you live in a state that has decent regulations on homeschooling. And the material I want to expose my children to is kind of similar to the material that I was exposed to, in that I read the Hardy Boys, I read classical poetry, I read old editions of National Geographic when it wasn't a politically motivated organization. Different sorts of things from way back when, a lot of materials from the 40s and 50s and early 60s. That's what I was generally raised on. And that's what I'm going to be, you know, like fairy tales and stuff like this, Aesop's fables and stuff like this. That is the general plan. I think that's the general thing you want to expose your children to. Also, you don't really want to expose your kids to screen time. It's very important to limit screen time for children to as little as possible, particularly before the age of 5. The personality really develops in the first 5 years of life. If you want your child to be some sort of consumer of information, you want them to sit passively and watch a screen and you know, see sunk costs in that, and you want that to be a part of their personality, then you go right ahead. But I'm not going to do that. Steve Jobs didn't do it that way. Bill Gates didn't do it that way. I think they're onto something. I think they know something that we may not. And just scientifically, you know, screens kick people into alpha wave, which is a suggestibility. It's like alpha waves, you know, it's the way the brain sort of operates. And it's just a lot of suggestibility with that. I don't want my children that way. I want my children to be discerning. I want them to be educated. I want them to be able to create their own fun. So that's a general sort of schooling philosophy. I learned a lot of that from Neil Postman, from John Taylor Gatto, and different sources like that talk about homeschooling or the you know, sick nature of public schooling itself.
Yeah, another one that I sometimes I've tuned into before is the School Sucks podcast, and it's definitely libertarian, and I don't go there for my politics, but hey, he's got a lot of good insight into that world as a former educator. But yeah, I think you're onto something there, especially with the screen time. You know, we have to be sort of fascistic, if you will, when it comes to regulating the consumption of media, just because of all the horrendous stuff that's out there. And we can't, you know, this is a multicultural society now. It's not a white majority society. It is technically, but it won't be soon. So we have to start thinking in that mindset, and we have to understand that with that means that we don't have high trust anymore. We don't have these institutions that we can rely on. And so don't be naive about that unless you don't care about your kids. I mean, if you just want them to become NPCs or whatever. Now, again, a lot of that is genetic, I think. I listened to the Millennial with Jared Taylor, which he was talking about this book of, you know, just how much of it is genetic and stuff. And also, he went into some more specifics about kind of what the things that parents can actually control and what they can't, and trying to separate those things. So the reality is that in terms of personality, a lot of that is already done for you, and intelligence. So that's kind of a weight off of people's back, hopefully. Like, hopefully they don't have to worry too much about that, and they can rely more on common sense and just letting, creating these barriers to all of the toxic people and the toxic information that's out there, the hateful information. This is a good chance for me to plug my upcoming book, which should be out soon. It's a children's book explaining diversity to kids and just kind of telling them that it's okay to be proud of who you are and to, seek out people like you as well. It's a very positive message, so I hope people will look for that. But yeah, it's I think that do you think then that could go too far, like that level of control? That is there a balancing act there where you sort of let the kids find stuff that's interesting to them, but ultimately you have some veto power there? What do you think? In terms of media consumption, I mean, specifically.
5 years ago, I would have been inclined to say yes, but I think it's very incumbent upon parents to cultivate the information that the children are taking in, because children with a click of a button can see, Minnie Mouse and Frozen being killed and stuff like this. The whole spate of strange serial killer type cartoons came out on YouTube. I mean, I don't even want to get into the satanic nature of Disney, but it seems like the people that want to ruin the minds of children have realized, oh, we have a free speech platform on the web, and the tech giants are going to deplatform us. So let's go for it, and let's push as much content and capture as much of the SEO as we possibly can with this content. And the same goes for app developers, game developers. They put in strange stuff into their games. And so I think you have to keep a close eye. And that's done out of love. I don't think that's helicopter parenting. I think it's just involvement with your kid's life. And it's also important to have some perspective. I am 32 years old, and I didn't have the internet. I didn't have the internet till I was 17. And so my parents just naturally said, okay, these books are interesting. Bernstein Bears. I know Bernstein Bears is not cool now, but Bernstein Bears back then was okay. The Grinch Stole Christmas and stuff like this. They would choose these books from the library for me, and they would have me read them, and I would sort of get a feel. And then I would start to be able to navigate my way through things. And I think you just have to do the same thing with your kids. You have to take your time. You have to procure the right things early on, and they will naturally gravitate toward what is healthy to them. But that doesn't mean that you don't just tune them out. You got to stay involved. You got to stay there and present.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where was I? I was just thinking about the Berenstain Bears. I had those books too. They're good books. I even remember there's one that's like sort of anti-diversity, where like the panda bears are moving in next door, and well, I'm sure like the Papa Bear learns some kind of a lesson. I don't think, some people probably wondering if Berenstain is Jewish. I think maybe I think he might have been married. I don't know.
It could be German as well.
Yeah, Steen. It's up in the air, but yeah, it's kind of funny. Like the Papa Bear was looking at the panda bears moving in. He's got this arms crossed, furrowed look on his brow. It's funny, but you don't think about that stuff when you're a kid, and so that's a good point. Kids are very innocent, and they don't have the capacity to understand this stuff. You've gotta treat them like a vessel, which you are responsible for getting them through their childhood. And once you do that, hopefully you've done a great job of it, with the help of a community. I know you've got a lot of videos on your channel talking about importance of community and stuff in these chaotic times. And but yeah, why don't you plug your channel, speaking of it, and your website and stuff?
Yeah, you can just find me at, Steve Franssen on YouTube, making some interesting videos lately. I also have a lecture series that I'm selling for $40, and it is a lecture series on self-knowledge. Self-knowledge was my wheelhouse for a long time. I'm sort of now just going more universalist and just approaching whatever topics are interesting to me, but I really was dedicated to figuring out what self-knowledge was for a long time. So the road to self-knowledge is available on my website. You can click the link there. Otherwise, some of the videos I've been talking about lately is, this myth that children are expensive. I examined that. I've talked about multiculturalism, the oncoming racial crisis, the racial component, the sectarian violence that we can reasonably assume will come out of these mass migration policies. And then some dating stuff, telling guys not to stick their dick in crazy, women to not let crazy stick its dick in them. So covering both sides of the coin there. I'm just trying to provide value this year and see where things go. So I appreciate anyone that takes an interest, and I'm on Twitter every single day. Every single day I'm in the trenches.
And I'll add to that list, masculinity. You're a very good source on that from what I've seen, just helping men become the men that they need to be to create these families and so on, which is very important.
Absolutely. I'm very passionate about the family. I say in my Twitter description, I tweet about family values, and masculinity is, it makes family values possible.
Yeah, femininity is important as well. It's just that masculinity has been targeted, I think. So that's the reason that we need to talk about it. Well, okay. It's been a good interview. We'll keep it short and sweet, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.